But by the time of Houses of the Holy, they sign up with Hypnosis, which were the preeminent sort of album cover purveyors of the mid 70s. They did the artwork for Dark Side of the Moon, the Pink Floyd albums. They did it for the Yes albums. They did some of the Sabbath albums. They did bizarre avant-garde artwork of a time at a time where that was really flying very well with the rock stuff in that era. They did a bunch of the UFO covers. If you go to Google and you go Hypnosis album covers, you will see how prevalent they were at the time in creating artwork for albums of that era. And they come up with this concept for Houses of the Holy of, it turns out there's this rock formation that they used for this, and it was really only
two girls
in her early teens who was naked and climbing up this rock formation, but they reproduced it several times so it looked like several of them going up this thing, and then they put these weird filters on it so it had this orange glow to it, and the sky was kind of orange, and it's otherworldly and all of that. And it was a very artistic sort of endeavor. And of course, anytime you put anyone naked anywhere, you have backlash in some respects. And of course, if it's a kid, even though all you're seeing is their butt, you get a backlash. So people were not thrilled with the album cover. The more puritanical people didn't have a good response to that. But in general speaking, it was his Led Zeppelin album when Led Zeppelin were at their prime, and you're still in, an era where this artistic creativity was given a free pass.
And then there's also the inside cover of that album, where it kind of almost looks like someone's getting sacrificed on top of the mountain.
Yeah. So, whether you dug the cover art or you didn't, again, there's no mention of the band name Led Zeppelin on the album sleeve. It's just completely abstract art that they chose, that they wanted to have on their album. They wanted you to focus on the music rather than images of the band or anything like that other people would typically do.
All right, so the album opens with The Song Remains the Same, which is a song that took many listens for me to kind of get into, and I'm not sure if I have figured it out yet. It's a interesting one. It's a weird one.
It is weird, but it is really cool. And Jimmy would play this one on the double neck as well. And it's another sort of epic tour de force guitar moment where he's playing, electric 12 string and electric 6 string, and it would become a big thing live. And then really good bass playing, by the way. And not that there isn't on all the tracks, but there's some really good bass work on Song Remains the Same when you get into the verses. It's a ambitious track for an opening number. It's not one of these more to the point ones like Immigrant Song where it gets in and gets out. It's sort of like starting with a pretty ambitious opener, 5.5 minutes long.
And I do think Robert Plant's vocals sound kind of thin and very high, because I think they were also sped up.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, this is where he's still in his peak, and still able to sing high really well and stuff. And when you get to the movie of The Song Remains the Same, the Robert Plant video part of this is over Song Remains the Same and the Rain Song, which when The Song Remains the Same ends on this album, it goes into the Rain Song. And we've talked a little bit about the Rain Song throughout this podcast and how brilliant that is. It's again, now we're talking an almost 8-minute song.
Very long.
That really takes its time to make its point, and it's a beautiful song, and it's beautiful from its construction, and what Jimmy came up with and the arrangement and everything is really wonderful. And so it's an interesting way to kick off an album. You basically, 12, 13 minutes in, on one sort of like epic run, because Song Remains the Same sort of blends into Rain Song, and it's like two big tracks.
Yeah.
Rather than like starting off with like one high energy track and then moving. It's an interesting choice for an album sequence, that you're starting off with these two tracks. One is sort of a mid-tempo thing that's sort of energetic, and the other one's, again, you're talking about almost a love song or a ballad with Rain Song.
And it features...
That takes it... It really takes its time.
Yeah, and it also features the Mellotron, early day synthesizer.
Yep.
And what's also interesting, that Jimmy Page was a big fan of George Harrison. And
yeah, this part.
Yeah, and the first two notes...
And George was not a big fan of Led Zeppelin.
Is that so?
Yeah, so George had said something along the lines of, they've never written anything that means anything, or something along that. He slagged them a little bit.
Wow.
So in the first opening notes of Rain Song, Jimmy decided he wanted to quote something, the George Harrison song.
First two notes,
from the Beatles. Yeah.
And it's John Bonham put brushes on his drums too in this song.
Yeah, this is John's playing very orchestrally here. It's very much, instead of being like a rock drummer, he's being like an orchestral percussionist. You get timpanis and you get... Yeah, there's a drum beat eventually, but it's like he's playing orchestral sort of ideas and fills and flourishes to enhance the arrangement, rather than to just be, it's not that he's holding down the beat. Throughout most of the song, there is no drums.
And then we get Over the Hills and Far Away.
Yeah, again, we're talking about an absolute classic that is one of my top 10 Zeppelin songs of all time. It starts off with this acoustic thing that Jimmy came up with, and it goes from there, and it goes into this bizarre solo section where it changes key, and they stay there for a little while, and then they really do this weird way of getting back into the main song. But this is a great song where like this was like a pop hit almost as well. Certainly a radio staple of its time, and Robert Plant sings the shit out of this. And then anytime you ever hear him singing it live, he's ducking the notes.
Yeah.
Live, he never sings the part he's singing on the studio. It's like he's saving his voice to not go way up there and hit those high notes. He's ducking it, and I always found that really disappointing in the live versions of this song. But the studio version of this song is one of the classic Zeppelin songs, absolutely.
Right, and then we get The Crunch, which is a song I don't like at all, to be honest.
This is straight up James Brown funk. This is where this comes from. This is like they started jamming on this funk jam thing, and Robert Plant came in and gave it the vocal. And if you like James Brown, you kind of get where this comes from. And it's tongue in cheek. It's Led Zeppelin playing funk, and I think it's more fun than serious.
Yeah, maybe I don't get
it. Occasionally they would throw this in for a few seconds in the live set. But I mean, this is like, you were coming up on Jamaica as well, which is like, again, tongue in cheek, them playing reggae, right? But the crunge is pretty much a James Brown type groove.
Yeah.
And all these guys were influenced by that. So, and then Robert Plant comes in, and here's Jimmy Page playing some really cool funk guitar licks.
Well, maybe I need to listen to it more, but I always just find myself getting annoyed when I listen to it.
Yeah, I understand. It's not for everybody necessarily, but I mean, you take it in the spirit of where it was. And, it wasn't meant to be a super serious thing. It was a jam.
Then we get Dancing Days, which is one of my wife's favorite songs of theirs.
Yeah, Dancing Days is weird in that Jimmy had this riff, and Robert Plant is singing this vocal that is sort of a melody that's like, it goes from the root to a half step up. It's odd in its construction melodically. So it's built around this half step thing, and it works, and it's kind of quirky and all of that, and it's a good song and all of those things, but it's just a little strange in its construction and a little out there, and not like it's more melodically strident and challenging than most things. If you listen to the way he's singing the vocals over these changes are not really conducive to melodic vocals. So he's left with this narrow corridor to walk down to sing a melody for this song, and it works, but it's definitely sort of a unusual one-off track.
And we get Jamaica. It's a play on
Yes,
Jamaica.
pronounced Jamaica. Pronounced Jamaica. Yes. But this is them having a go at reggae and taking the piss on reggae. And the old English joke, did your wife go away on holiday? Yeah. Where'd she go? Jamaica. Jamaica? No. She went on her own accord. It was this stupid British joke. And it went completely over the heads of everybody in America who called it Dire Maker and all of that. And really, this song is a 4-chord song where the lyrics are absolutely nonsensical, and the only thing about this thing that really is magnificent is John Bonham and the way he plays the drums on it. Otherwise, it's kind of a tedious little 4-chord song where Robert Plant's just going oh.
Yeah.
You don't have to. It works. It became this became a radio staple. You'd hear this all the time, and it works because of the greater good of the way it sounds, and John Bonham's drum beats and drum fills. The drum fills in this song are just super, and the sonics of how Bonham sounds in this track is great. But again, this is like this is really like Zeppelin. Again, having a laugh and taking the piss.
I do like the guitar. It's
it's a great little part, yeah. But I mean, it's just sort of a sort of
tongue in cheek kind of
non-serious, throwaway kind of track. And yet, when they did that stuff and they did it, somehow it still managed to land on its feet.
Yeah, you could. I think I could make the argument that the Crunch and Jamaica are the weakest tracks on this album.
Yeah, I think you could probably say that.
Because after that, we get No Quarter, which is one of my personal favorites. I think that one is just awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it was always a staple in the concerts, and it was John Paul Jones's moment to stretch out. For me, it's never been my favorite Zeppelin song, for whatever reason, and that's just personal. It's just like to me, it was always sort of a little too slow and a little too long, but it does have its moments, and it is a great live moment in many cases, and it did become one of their staple songs both live and not so much a radio thing, but I mean it did stay in the live set.
I think it would be too long to. It's not one of those radio friendly songs. Well, then again, Stairway to Heaven became a radio hit, but it's like 7 minutes.
Well, I think one of my problems with No Quarter is it's dynamically it's fairly flat. Where's the energy? When does it come in? When does it go away? It doesn't have like dynamic leaps.
Yeah, that's true.
It starts off slow and the drums come in, they're kind of lazy, but boom, 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 and it maintains this sort of lazy energy throughout the thing.
For me, it's one of those tracks that you can like space out to. It's almost like a Pink Floyd-ish, well, sort of, kind of,
Great track to get high to.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're not doing that, you may find that it's a little dynamically flat.
Yeah. And it's a great. I love the sound of it too. It's a great hi-fi demo track.
Yeah. To me, the thing takes off a little more live, where Jimmy Page takes this ripping solo in the live version in '73, and that then it's like ooh, there's something, and it doesn't have that in the certainly not to the same degree of potency in the studio version.
But I quite like the solo in the studio version too. I don't know. It's a unique solo too.
Sure. I think just the live version, the solo gives it an injection of energy that I was so desperately waiting for.
Right. I do like the riff too, like da 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 da. It's kind of classic blues
Yeah,
rock.
and the more he plays it with attitude, the better it gets. The more he really makes that riff rude, the better it gets.
Yeah.
In my opinion,
It's one of my favorite tracks from the reunion Celebration Day concert. He plays it with the wah wah, and it just sounds so enormous. And then the album closes with The Ocean.
Yeah, which is again, arguably in the top 5 Zeppelin tracks. Yeah, so John Bonham counts this off, and they rip into this great riff by Jimmy Page, and the drums are epically big. On the remasters particularly, you're hearing every bit of John Bonham's kit. You're hearing his kick drum pedals squeak. It's in there if you listen for it. It's just this massive drum sound and this massive riff, and it just works on every level, and it's really super strong, and it's one of the great Zeppelin tracks of all time. The live version of this song, I don't know how it ended up on the cutting room floor for Song Remains the Same, but the live version of this from 1973 in Madison Square Garden with Jimmy Page like prancing all over the stage. He was like Jakey Lee before Jakey Lee in terms of his persona on stage, the way he, his bravado and how he was playing these licks, and just the balls of being able to lay into this and do whatever you want to do with it, and look so cool doing it, and prance around and really deliver it in a way that was both visual, live, and it's clearly on the studio track as well. You go through this riff thing where it's like you have the main riff, and then there's the verse thing, which is a different riff, and at the end it kicks into a different gear, and you have sort of a jam out.
Yeah.
But it's also Robert Plant singing this song really, really well, and this one just is one of those ones where everything's hitting on the right cylinder. Everything is working absolutely to perfection with Zeppelin, and it hits really hard and lands really well. It was a great choice for the closing track of the album.
And it's also another unusual time signature.
Yep. And this is part of that thing with where I was talking about Jimmy playing off what the drums does, and interacting with the drum parts and turning the beat around here and there and things like that. Everything about The Ocean works.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's about the drums.
And it was dedicated to the audience when they played it live, as the ocean represented the crowd to them,
Right.
All right. Anything else we have to say about this album, The Houses of the Holy from 1973?
It's funny. I feel this album sometimes gets a little overlooked, and it's hard to say that about an album that's sold as many millions as this album has. But in the context of the others, this is, how do you follow up Led Zeppelin 4? Well, this is a pretty good successor. Okay? If you look at Zeppelin 4 and you say, arguably this is the peak of Led Zeppelin's prowess and creativity, it never got better than 4, right? If you say that, House of the Holy is not that far removed from 4. It's pretty damn good. It's a really good, strong follow-up. And then, we're going to get into Physical Graffiti, which is a double album, so it's nowhere near the concise package of an 8-song album, which 4 was, and what this is. Physical Graffiti, they're giving you a double album where they're stretching out all those things and putting in outtakes that didn't make it on other albums and stuff. There's a song called Houses the Holy on Physical Graffiti that didn't make this, that was the title of this album. Houses of the Holy, the song, comes on Physical Graffiti. It was recorded for this album.
I always thought that was really cool.
Yeah, but you start to think it's like, they're making their editorial choices of like what goes on the album.
Yeah.
Right? And the track that they took the title from didn't make it onto this album. That speaks in part to how strong Houses of the Holy was. And you could say, okay, why put the grunge on this album instead of Houses of the Holy, right? Yeah. Maybe the grunge belongs on the Outtakes album, Physical Graffiti.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, it didn't really matter. As far as giving you, a follow-up album to what is probably their best album, this is pretty good. And it's more, like I said, a more concise statement than you get from Physical Graffiti.
And around this time were the drugs already coming in? There was...
Yeah, it's not showing up so much in the musical output. But to believe what you may have read, 73 is around the time Jimmy Page is really falling for heroin.
Right.
And beginning to really succumb to an addiction to heroin. And it hasn't really affected his playing, it hasn't really affected his songwriting yet, but that would come. And they're still on top of their game here.
Right.
They're still Led Zeppelin is still, if you want to call the peak 4, they're still at their peak. They're still sort of holding their peak, right, for a little while.
Well, partying really hard in the meantime.
Yeah.
Like this is where it was still like fun and positive for the most part.
Certainly, I think from the creativity side, they were now at a level that, where they could do pretty much whatever they wanted and get away with whatever they wanted.
Right.
And you see some of that stuff in the movie Song Remains the Same.
Specifically, what are you referring to?
The way they would treat the venues, the way they would, treat the promoters, the way they would, there's a scene in Song Remains the Same where they're chasing this fan who's whacked out on drugs and, they drag him off into a room. And it looks like he's going to get a beating.
Right.
It's not so much the Zeppelin people doing that, but it's like, the security people in the venue and stuff. So, this was a crazy time. This was when, 200 and, I guess, what did they say? $200 plus $1,000 went missing from the hotel security box when they played in New York and stuff like that. And the drugs were starting to affect their ability to stay on top of their business.
Right.
And, the people like Peter Grant and Richard Cole, the road manager, they were arrested when that money went missing because, the police were thinking, this is an inside job. Someone from the band ripped off the band and stuff. So it's starting to be quite chaotic now. And it's starting to be such a incredibly large enterprise to take on the road that it's impossible to keep everything running perfectly smoothly, especially when you're, starting to do too many drugs and things like that.
Right.
So this is the beginning of that period where they are so big and their power is so absolute and they're able to do and get away with whatever they seem to want to at this time. But it's not affecting the music.